When was the last time you got a good old-fashioned talking to? You know the kind where someone just absolutely just puts you up against the wall somewhere and just in no uncertain terms. Well, there's more coming. Thank you. I wonder what he's going to do with all this. Anyway, a good old-fashioned talking to. I gave myself a good old-fashioned talking to last night after I backed my father-in-law's trailer into the side of my car. Yeah, he was a bit of an idiot, yes, apparently, according to myself. But I'm trying to think over the years how many times someone has just said to me, you need to smarten up. I've had enough of you, and this is all I'm going to take. Those kind of talks. The kind of talks I got like weekly at the vice principal's office. And Brandon, better straighten up. When a talk like that happens privately, if someone takes you into a back room somewhere or a vice principal's office, somewhere out of the public eye, and just lets you have it, that's one thing. But when someone does that publicly, like imagine if right now I just called one of you and said, stand up, because you're going to get a piece of my heart. Not great. Let's take that one step further. Let's say that the someone who did that is Jesus. What if it's Jesus who actually calls somebody out and just says, I've had enough. I'm not going to take this anymore. Well, let's look at a passage of Scripture where Jesus does just that. So the context here is he's teaching in a large crowd of people, as he often was, because Jesus, even though we don't often think it, Jesus was very famous. Jesus got to spend very little time alone. He coveted those times when he did get to be alone. He was always sailing away somewhere to be by himself or that type of thing, because everywhere he went, crowds would gather. Well, this was no exception. So a large crowd had gathered, and Jesus was doing some teaching, and then some Pharisees caught his eye. And he shifts gear. This is in Matthew 23, verses 13 to 15, where he I like to imagine just a little flash must have come over his eyes as he spotted those pompous Pharisees. And he starts out by saying, woe to you. Woe to you, teachers of the law and the Pharisees, you hypocrites. You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to. I mean, he's letting them have it here, right? He's leaving none to the imagination. You yourselves do not enter. Woe to you, you teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You travel over land and sea to win a single convert. And then, what happens? And when you have succeeded, you make them twice as much of a child of hell as you are. Whoa. Whoa. This is no easy moment for the Pharisees to take. And they're probably looking at each other and saying, what have we done? What have we done to deserve this kind of dressing down? All we've ever done is try to uphold the law. What could we have done to deserve such a thing? But he doesn't even finish there. He goes on, he calls them whitewashed tombs, he calls them evil, he calls them wicked, he calls them snakes, he calls them vipers. All in front of a large crowd of people. Something about that doesn't sound very Christ-like, but at the same time, sounds very Christ-like, doesn't it? He was not one to pull punches. And for some reason, with the Pharisees, he was not going to let them off the hook. Now, we need to understand something here. Before the Pharisees began to plot to kill Jesus, he was already calling them out. This is not the first time that he had made them the butt of the story, that he had made them a talking point of a negative sort. This is not the first time. It seems like he took almost every opportunity when he saw them to say words against them. Well, who are the Pharisees? You ever wondered who are these Pharisees? Well, the Pharisees, it was a sect of the Jewish faith. About 200 years before Christ, a group of lawyers and scholars and some teachers got together because they were very concerned because there was nothing, the word would be codified, but there was nothing that really gathered all of the law as they saw it into one place. And so they set about doing that. So they studied the first 5 books of the Old Testament, and they gathered up everything that appeared to be a command of God, and they wrote those down. And by the time they were done, they had 613 of them. 613 laws, according to them, that they found in the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Now, this was on top of course, God's law, which was the 10 Commandments. That was the law that was given to the nation of Israel. But they found 613. So I guess 608 more. Of those, 365 of those laws that they determined were laws were thou shalt not laws. In other words, things you can't do, that you're not to do. Now, in many cases, they're grasping at straws here. And if you think back to last week, and maybe if you were here last week, maybe many of you caught it online if you didn't, if you weren't here in person, but we talked about solid lines and dotted lines, right? Solid lines, what God makes universal for everybody when it comes to laws and commands, and dotted lines, what he makes for you individually. And you are not to impose your dotted lines on other people. Those are given to you, not to everybody. But for the Pharisees, when they looked through these first 5 books, the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible are called, when they looked at them, they took every example they could find. And anytime God told someone to do something, they turned it into a law. 365 negative, 248 positives, in a sense, of you shall do. So they put these all together. Part of it was because they were scared of losing this law, because they were forever being taken into captivity, right? Things were changing. They were always in their land, always seemed to be being possessed by other nations. And they really started, I would like to think anyway, with the best of intentions. And so in gathering all of that together, this pile of 613 laws, wait, I need to explain the thinking. You're wondering anyway what all this stuff up here is, so now I'm going to help us with something. Here's a command of God. The command of God, don't sit in this chair. Simple command. Right? So we're going to pretend, we're just pretending it's make-believe, but we're pretending that God decrees it to be a sin to sit in that chair. Pharisees write that down. That's number 1. Don't sit in that chair. Now the Pharisees, in an effort to protect God's law, they say, okay, well, we need to stop people from sitting in that chair. It's not enough that they don't sit in the chair. We need to stop them. So we're going to put a ring around that chair, and we're going to say you can't get any closer to that chair than that ring. Okay, that sounds all right. I'll write that down. And now, as they talk to one another, they're probably looking at one another and saying, I don't think that ring's good enough. I think someone might still sit in that chair because I think the ring's a little close to the chair, so they might still sit in it. So one of the Pharisees, they're the creative type, the smart type. They're saying, well, okay, well let's make sure that this doesn't happen. Let's put a sign on it. All right, now that's pretty clear. No sitting. We got a ring around it. Surely that will stop people from sitting in the chair. Yeah, okay, we'll write that down. So they write that down. Then they say, well, if you came up from that chair from behind and you weren't really looking, it looked like something you want to sit in, you might just sit down anyway, not knowing what that's about. So, the chair is kind of a temptation because as long as the chair is sitting there, people are going to think they're going to want to sit in. All right, well, you know what? Let's cover the chair. And if we cover the chair, then no one will even know there's a chair. And they'll know there's a chair and won't be tempted to sit on the chair. They won't be tempted to cross that hoop. And they won't have to ignore the sign. They won't sit there and they won't say, "This is awesome, write it down." Write it down. And then some wise soul got thinking, "Well, are you sure that's enough?" I don't know. What do you think? I'm not sure that that's enough. We can't have people sing. Well, what? Because they're going to want to peek under that. So let's not let them peek. Let's actually tie this covering to the chair, and that way, even if they were tempted, they couldn't get through the rope to get past the blanket, to get past the sign, past the hoop, to sit in the chair. We have protected them right that down. That's what we wrote that down. And then somebody says, "Well, that still looks tempting." When someone sees that kind of mess, they're still going to want to, somehow have a look at it. So let's put another song. Keep away. Now you think I'm kidding, and I kind of am. Except I'm kind of not. The Pharisees didn't stop there. This 613 laws ultimately became a tradition called the Mishnah. The Mishnah was an oral law, which was laws surrounding the laws to protect you from breaking the laws, lest you, be separated from God. This Mishnah, this oral tradition, ultimately did get written down later, and when it did get written down, it was 6,200 pages long. 6,200 pages. I was just all illustrated up, but I was going to bring a stack of books to show you what 6,200 pages looks like in old school books. It's even stacked about this high. And these are all laws and rules about rules, and laws about laws, about how not to break, and this and that, and the Pharisees would just spin themselves into the ground with this family silliness. You know that something as simple as God's command to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Simple command. The people, when they received it, they instinctively knew what that meant. They understood what a Sabbath was. They were told, work 7 and 6 days and take a day off, And on that day, dedicated to me and commune with me, meaning God. Real simple. Until the Pharisees got a hold of it. And when the Pharisees got a hold of it, they created 39 subcategories of what keeping the Sabbath day holy looked like. Each of those subcategories had from dozens to hundreds of rules. One of the things you weren't allowed to do on the Sabbath was work. And the work category alone had almost 2,000 rules attached to it. These guys were nuts. But if they had stopped there, that would be one thing. Like if they had just said, okay, all we're trying to do is protect the sanctity of what God told us to do. Never mind the fact that we made 10 laws into 613, and we made those 613 into 6,200 pages. That probably wouldn't have made Jesus angry. He might have just sarcastically insulted them instead. He might have took them aside and said, guys, you've gone overboard here. That's never been the Father's intention. My Father always wanted relationship, not all these rules. What are you doing? Well, what set Jesus off, what caused him to continually tear down these Pharisees, is the Pharisees equated their laws with God's laws. So if I went over to this chair that they were protecting, remember, What was the sin? Sitting in the chair. But if a Pharisee saw me take the sign away, you're sitting. That's a sin. You need to go stand in the corner. You need to go somewhere, but you're not going to temple today because you're a sinner. Now you need to go and ritualistically cleanse or do something like that. And if it went further and took the rope, you get the idea? They made these things sin. And man is not allowed to call things sin. Only God is. So if you want to know why Jesus was always so ticked off at these guys, it's because they took God's law, his commands, which were made for a relationship, and they turned into thousands of stupid rules, which turned it into a religion. And this is what Jesus was angry about. You don't get to call what is sin, what's sin. Only God does. That's not for you to do. And what God declares sin is simple to find, easy to read, and easy to understand. And you made it impossible for people to engage because of your sins. Now, anybody here remember gym class? And I know you wonder, like, what are these things? And I got thinking, like, how can I really make this point stand out and make sense? And I found a gym class. And remember doing the high jump? And gym class? And you're like, you know, that day in gym, it was covered because that mat that was about that thick was brought out. And it's placed there, and the gym teacher sets us up, and you're looking at the gym teacher, you know, there's no way that gym teacher can't jump anything. Because, you know, that gym teacher hasn't done a push-up since he told me to do 100. And anyway, so high jump. And I want to try to illustrate what I'm talking about here with this, okay? See if this makes sense. God sets a standard. There's God's standard. That's law. Okay? So God creates a law, and he says, for a relationship with me, there's the bar. That's the bar that you have to get over to approach me. Why? When you read through the entire Testament, the Old Testament, what you see is God desperately wanted relationship with his people. Desperately. And he wasn't creating rule after rule after rule after rule after rule so that they could be holy enough to have a relationship with him. They would have a relationship no matter how holy they were. It just always wouldn't be a good one. And so God made his rules, his commands, his laws, put them into place at a level that you could actually attain them. If you read through the 10 Commandments, there's not one of those commandments that's impossible to achieve. It's under your own power. It really isn't. But when these teachers of laws and nothing got a hold of that and turned it into this gigantic stack, what they effectively did was they raised the bar. That's what they did. And you know, when they raise that bar, what's actually happened, it's man setting standards to try to achieve holiness through a set of rules. Completely missing the fact that that was never the intention. There would never be a way that you could in and of yourself be holy enough to have a direct connection with God, face to face. There would never be that. But the Pharisees said you could. All you need to do is hit our standard. And guess what? If you didn't hit our standard, you're never going to hit God's. See? When they put that into place, what they're really saying is that God's standard isn't good enough. That's what's really being said. Anytime you add something to what God says, what you're effectively saying is, oh, God got a good try. I got it. Okay. Just telling somebody not to sit in the chair, that's not good enough. So you leave it to me, God, I'll make sure that this happens. See, this tendency, this drift toward religion and overcomplicating something that's really in the heart so simple, something that's made for a relationship but turns into this set rules and things that you have to do. And just like your gym teacher, at the original bar, your gym teacher might be standing there and saying, jump, jump, jump. And what's he doing? He's standing at the clipboard and he's judging. And your friends are probably standing there laughing, as you crash through it and do a face plant and that, or whatever that might end up looking like, or something worse, trying to get past that bar. We're judging. See, let me show you. If it hasn't made sense by now, I really want you to understand this. The space between God's law and your made-up standards is called religion. That's what Jesus was trying to get rid of. But you know what Jesus did? Just in closing, I want to look at three concepts, okay? Religion, it condemns people. If you look at a set of rules and you start saying, you're not following that rule, you're not following that rule, you're not following that rule, you're not following that one or that one or that one, that means you're not holy. And the person that says that, you know what you are, right? God. At least in your own mind. You get to make that call. You don't get to make that call. God gets to make that call. Religion. It condemns. Now the world looks at religion because in general the world never looks at God's original laws and intent and quest for a relationship. The world never wants to see that. What they target instead is the silliness of religion and this overreach that happens. And the world says, well, I'm not having any part of that. And they just throw both bars away. They just remove any standard. They condone. Right? The world says there is no absolute. The world says there is nothing that you absolutely can look at and say, that is for one, for all, forever. The world says no. No. The world comes up with silly things like, well, you can have your own truth. Is there anything more annoying than when someone says, oh, you go, girl, you speak your truth? Honestly, what does that even mean? If true is true at all, there's only one truth. If there's more than one version of something, one of those versions isn't true. Duh. But the world spun itself into this pit of insanity, where when you take away the absolute, then what do you have? Anybody here who's an educator or works for the government or whatever, how many notices a month, a week, a year? How often do you get an email or something slipped onto your desk that's telling you, okay, here's the words you're allowed to say out and you're not allowed to say? Here's what you can call people and what you can't call people, and here's a word that you've used your whole life and it's never really caused you any whatever, but now we're erasing that word, you're not allowed to say it because there's no absolutes. And everybody's running around and they're saying, my truth, speak of my truth, speak my truth, and I don't like your truth, so it can't be true, so we have to just erase that. When the world removed the standards and just condoned everything, as long as it makes you feel good, do it, the world took a giant step into insanity. Now Jesus says, listen, guys, this is my Father's standard. In the book of Matthew, from chapters 5 to 7, is Jesus, maybe one of his most famous teachings. It's called the Sermon on the Mount. And in that message that he gave that day to thousands upon thousands of people, he was setting the stage, setting the framework for his ministry, how he saw things. And in that message, he uses a turn of phrase, which is very interesting. He says, "You have heard it said, but I tell you." And he says that over and over again. You have heard it said, but I tell you. So he took something like, you have heard it said, you shall not commit murder. Simple command. And Jesus said, but you know what? There's not even a space here high enough to tell you what that really means. Because what it really means is that if you even look at somebody with malice or ill intent in your eye, you've broken that standard. Ironically, Jesus spends, it must have taken him hours to preach this message. I mean, for us, it's boiled down into 3 chapters of Scripture. But in real life, when he did it would have taken longer. And people had to be wondering, well, I don't get it. Like, are you trying to remove rules? Or are you giving us more? Like, you're showing us something because you're saying that the Father wants relationship, and then you're telling me that, don't murder. And then, if I even think an ill thought towards someone, I've broken that. Like, I don't get it. And Jesus says, listen, I'll give you. I'm not going to remove it. And I'm not placing another arbitrary line. I'm putting it where my Father put it. But I want you all to understand the depth of what my Father was saying. And that depth should humble you. Because all of a sudden you realize, you know what? I might have had a chance at what the Pharisees created. I might have been able to do that with the right friends network and the right teacher and the right set of rules surrounding that. I might have been able to do that, but what Jesus is saying, I could never do. I could never be that holy. Jesus says, right, you can't, but I can. So when you connect with me, being Jesus, I will get you over the bar. And a thing called grace kicks in. And when you run up to it, you make the mistake of trying to follow God's rules in your own strength, thinking that somehow that's going to make you holy. It won't, it's a lie. And you run into that bar, and you do one of those face plants, you just fail miserably. Jesus said, it's okay, I got this. I got you. Connect with me. I will connect you with the Father. You're never going to do that on your own. That's why I came. And by the way, I, being Jesus, I did do that. And by the power of my doing it, I became fit to be a sacrifice for you, so that anyone who connects with me connects with the Father. And that, my friends, is amazing news. Isn't it? I urge you today, if you're here and you have not connected, if you have not made that move, if you've not made that decision to say, you know what? I am a sinner. I can't meet any of these standards. I can't do that. But I want to. And this is your day. This is your day to take that step and say, yeah, you know what? I do want to live that way. I do want Jesus to take me and say, I care. You're my child. And with me, with our relationship with me, we'll get over any bar anybody ever places. And we will connect with the Father. And ultimately, we'll live with him forever because of that decision we made. And if that is you today wanting to do that, please don't leave here without letting us know on that communication card that you want to make that decision or that you have made that decision so that we can contact you and help you take those next steps. But this is the opportunity. It's a perfect opportunity. If you've understood this teaching, there's only one excuse for not doing it, and it's your own stubbornness. And it would be your own doing, and that would be a shame, because it's not necessary.